David, it's so nice to have you talking with us today on 30 Good Minutes. We're so glad you could be here.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, while you're here in Chicago. So tell me how you became a playwright. How does one discover that calling?
I didn't grow up in a theatrical family, and when I went to college my freshman year, we all went to the San Francisco Bay Area to see plays. And I saw a couple, and I thought, oh, I think I can do that. And then I started writing plays in my spare time, and I found a professor who was willing to take a look at them. And he told me that they were really bad, which they were, and that my problem was that I had the desire to write plays, but I didn't actually know anything about the theater. But that same professor became kind of a mentor of mine, and then we designed a major in playwriting, and I wrote a play to be done in my dorm my senior year, which eventually became my first play to be done in New York.
That's wonderful. So tell us something about, we're interested in people's faith journeys and their faith backgrounds. Tell us something about your faith background as a young person.
Yeah, I was raised in the evangelical tradition, and I wrote about this in a play called Golden Child, which was done here in Chicago at Silk Road Theater Project in 2007. And then by the time I got to college, it was basically the first time I got out of the house. I grew up with a lot of pastors, and our family is very religiously oriented. And I kind of broke away from that tradition and broke away from Christianity in general. And
which is not uncommon in the college years.
Yeah,
right?
I started to sort of explore things for myself, and there was a lot that didn't seem to make sense to me about the religion. And also because I think I was raised specifically with Chinese evangelicals, I felt that there was, eventually came to feel that there was kind of a melding of Chinese cultural influences and Christian influences. And so I started to think of it as kind of Confucianism and Christian drag.
Okay, give us an example of that. Like, how would Chinese evangelicalism be different from?
Well, for instance, I mean, I think there is a big emphasis on things that would be, we think of as Chinese, the way the terms now use, tiger moms, raise their kids, and sort of studying and discipline, and that's not inconsistent with the Christian tradition, but it's not really what Christianity is about. But it sort of became more codified in a Christian sense when I was growing up. So I kind of broke away from all that.
Did you feel like you were kind of missing some of the grace and mercy?
Yeah, I didn't feel there was a lot of joy in the religion. And there were also just a lot of things about it that seemed inconsistent to me. And I kind of always felt that since I was a kid, but I tried to go along. And so I was kind of hostile to the religion for a number of years. And there's actually kind of 3 plays that I've written that chart that progression. The first play was called Family Devotions, and it's being also done here in Chicago at the Halcyon Theater in August. And I wrote that when I was 23. And that's about a Chinese Christian family, and I think it's very angry at the religion. And then I wrote a second play that was sort of moderate, and then a third play, this one, Golden Child, about my great-grandfather, which really then attempted to understand his reasons for converting and kind of look at the positive and negative. And then I ended up kind of going back into an Episcopalian church in Brooklyn, where I live.
And how did you end up in the Episcopal church?
My daughter, I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter, when she was in preschool, we enrolled her in a preschool that was connected to the church. And my wife and I met the pastor, and we just liked him, and he seemed very open. And so we started attending that church, Grace Church in Brooklyn Heights. And I started to find that a kind of mainline Christianity, which is probably more politically and socially liberal, sort of dovetailed both with my beliefs and principles now, and also related to the tradition in which I grew up.
So, but the worship style would be quite different from what you grew up with.
Yeah.
I mean, what appealed to you about the Episcopal worship?
I have to say, I'm much more comfortable now with a worship service which has respect for and incorporates the history of the church. because to me that's stability, even though it can certainly be abused. That stability feels secure to me, and also I think can mitigate against kind of individual excesses. Whereas I felt that the tradition that I grew up in, because it was so much about your personal relationship with God, there are times when I feel that people's individual sort of prejudices and predilections become interpreted as, you know, what God's saying. And for me, a more traditional service mitigates against that somewhat.
Is there any part of you that, because you're involved in theater, likes the beauty and the pageantry of an Episcopal
You know, that's
service?
probably true too.
Better costumes?
Yeah, you know, yes, the costumes are great, the processions are great. You know, I do appreciate probably a more traditional church music. All those things emphasize the more theatrical elements of the Christian tradition.
Well, I would love to talk a little bit about the play that I just got to see here in Chicago called Chinglish, and it's the story of this Midwestern guy who goes to this small town in China and is trying to do business there. Could you tell us some of the inspiration for that?
Yeah, I've been going to China a fair amount over the past 5 or 6 years. Basically because China has become very interested in Broadway-style musicals, and I happen to be the only even nominally Chinese person who's ever written a Broadway show.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, people are having me over for meetings. And nothing ever came of that work-wise, but it was kind of a fascinating opportunity to see China today, which is just growing by leaps and bounds, and kind of 1 year in China is like 5 years in the rest of the world in terms of, you know, the amount of change that takes place.
Had you ever gotten to go back to China before to see family? Or
you know, I went in '93 was my first time, and I went with my parents and my sisters before we all started having kids, and we saw where my father grew up. So I kind of had a roots trip in the early '90s, but then I didn't go again until 2005.
It seems that a lot of your work deals with the sort of comedy of misunderstandings, and that there's a generosity in it. So in the play Chinglish, you know, signs are misspelled and people are constantly misunderstanding each other, but there seems to be sort of a generosity among the characters. Where do you think you got that? Does that relate to your faith at all?
You know, I feel like particularly being able to be raised in a Christian tradition, to walk away from it for a while, and then to come back to it and feel kind of accepted on all those at all those points in my life, gives me a certain sense of openness and appreciation for the generosity that others have shown to me. I mean, even though I come from an evangelical tradition, and a lot of my, you know, we have a lot of pastors in the family, and you know, nobody was very happy when I was away from the church, and people still have, you know, certain people have questions about my faith even now, but everybody always kind of accepted me as, you know, as a relative, as a nephew, as a whatever. You know, my parents were always great about it, and so I never felt I was not loved. And I think that's a huge a gift.
And that's really central to our faith, that it's all one big church. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, David.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great to talk to you.